In this video, we're going to examine some of the current doctrine of Shincheonji. And in order to do that, I want to first look at some of the articles that Lee Man-Hee has written so that we can establish two facts about Lee Man-Hee. As we go through these articles, some of them will have sections that I've highlighted as the key part of that article that relates to what we're going to be discussing. And if you want, you can pause it and read the entire section of that article, or better yet, there is a document in the description where I've compiled all of the information from all of the videos, and that document will have links to the entire article for each and every article that's mentioned. But let's get into it. So in this article, he says, I am the one who saw all the events from Revelation 1 to Revelation 22. And in the General Assembly Year 36 Revelation Education, which was approved by Lee Man-Hee, it says the one and only witness who saw and heard the events of all the chapters of Revelation is the promised pastor, which we know as Lee Man-Hee. And in the Revelation 10 education from the Philip tribe leader, it says Jesus showed New John the physical fulfillment of all the events recorded in the entire book of Revelation. And in the General Assembly education, again, it says what he saw was the reality of the physical fulfillment of Revelation. In this article, he says, I am ready to testify in detail according to the reality and truth I have witnessed and the explanation I have received from the Spirit. In this book, he says, New John, who listens to the explanation of Revelation from the angel, is the only one who knows the truth of these mysteries. And again in the book, he writes, the pastor to whom an angel is sent to show and explain all the events of Revelation. And then in this article, he writes, since he saw everything that fulfilled from Revelation 1 to 22, why wouldn't he know the physical entities that appear as the Word in flesh? He knows them all. The one who fulfilled it is Jesus who returned, and the one who saw the fulfillment is the promised pastor. So hopefully, you can start to see what we're getting towards. This first basic belief is that Lee Man-Hee saw and heard the physical fulfillment of all the events of the entire book of Revelation, from Revelation 1 to Revelation 22, and received the explanation of the events from an angel. And if you have any problem with any part of that, you just have to go back and look at the references that we've looked at and find that every single part of that statement is supported by what Lee Man-Hee himself has said. So let's take a look at the sources for the second basic belief. In the Revelation 10 lesson from the Philip tribe leader, he says, what does it mean in reality to take and eat the scroll? Taking and eating means he realized the words written in the opened book in their entirety and sealed them in his heart. In the Revelation sealing education from the General Assembly, it says that received and ate it means completely knowing and perceiving the true meaning of Revelation and the realities of its physical fulfillment. Again, the education, it says, I did not eat a single bowl of rice, but read and mastered the entire Bible within a week. And in the book, he says, what does it mean for John to eat the open book? It means he completely understands its content and writes it on his heart. This is because he has sealed the words of the new covenant, the words of Revelation, in his heart. So what is the second basic belief? It is that he attained a complete understanding of the entire Bible and has perceived the true meaning of Revelation and the realities of its physical fulfillment. So hopefully if you're a Shincheonji member, you already knew those two basic beliefs. This is very fundamental to a Shincheonji member's faith. And if you have any doubts about any part of those two basic beliefs, all you have to do is go back, look at the references, and see that this is actually what Lee Man-Hee is testifying about himself. So now that we've got those two basic beliefs established, let's start to get into the current doctrine of Shincheonji. And this first point is a minor one, but it's an interesting detail nonetheless. It's about the angel sent on Jesus' behalf. In Revelation 1 verse 1 to 3, it details how John receives the revelation from an angel, and Revelation 10 verse 8 to 10 is said to be the same event. And as we've seen in the previous slides, in the book The Physical Fulfillment of Revelation, on pages 9, 428 and 563, Chung Hui-Jin mentions that he receives explanation from the angel. But on page 214, he goes into more detail, so we can take a look at that. It says, this angel in Revelation 10, however, brings the revelation of Jesus and explains it. And then it says, the Spirit of the truth, the Spirit of the advocate, comes in Jesus' name and explains Jesus' words, teaching and guiding us into all truth. This is why this angel in Revelation 10 resembles Jesus. His job is to bring the book opened and revealed by Jesus, show it to Apostle John, i.e. New John, and explain to him all the events written in it. So we can clearly see from Chung Hui-Jinim's testimony that the angel who gave him the open scroll also explained to him all the events written in it. However, Lee Man-Hee has also said that he is the third to know or understand the book of Revelation, with the first being God and the second being Jesus. In the article The Summary of Revelation, we can see that he says, there are only three beings who know this book of Revelation. The three include God, who is the author of this book, Jesus, who received this book and opened all its seals, fulfilling all its content, and the promised pastor, who received and ate this book. He is the one who saw the fulfillment of the prophecies in this book, or in other words, the physical entities in reality. Additionally, in the article Faith of a True Believer, Chung Hui-Jinim writes, about 2,000 years have passed since God's last work, Revelation, was recorded, yet no one knows the purpose of it to this day. God, who is the author, is the first being to know the purpose of this book. Then Jesus, who received this book and opened it, is the second being who knows. Jesus, who opened the seals of this book and fulfilled it, gave the open scroll to the promised pastor, who saw and heard this, to eat it. Therefore, the promised pastor is the third person to know. And if there was any doubt, we can take a look at this article to verify that the open scroll is talking about the New Testament Revelation. It says, Revelation, the sealed scroll of the New Testament, was given to Jesus by God, and starts to take off the seals one at a time in Revelation 6. Once opened, Jesus feeds it to New John in Revelation 10. So this seems to introduce a contradiction. Somehow, even though the angel explained to Lee Man-Hee all the events written in the open scroll, the angel himself didn't understand it. How can the angel explain something it doesn't know? It's also interesting to note that in the articles that we looked at, Chung Hui-Jinim says that Jesus, rather than the angel, gave the open scroll to the promised pastor. And it's possible that he means that Jesus gave the open scroll to the promised pastor through his angel. But it's interesting to note that by not mentioning the angel in that article, he avoids having to explain the apparent contradiction that Chung Hui-Jinim was the third to know. And it might be tempting to think that the angel doesn't need to know or understand the open scroll, and could have just delivered it to Chung Hui-Jinim. But he said himself that the angel explained the open scroll to him, which would seem to imply the angel must have understood it. At the very least, this is confusing, but there's a lot to get through in this video, so let's take a look at the next topic, the sealed 144,000 of the 12 tribes. In Revelation 7, there are 144,000 from the 12 tribes who are sealed. There are also winds being held back in verse 1, and it states in verse 3 that these winds will not be released until the 144,000 have been sealed. So let's take a look at some of the articles that Chung Hui-Jinim has written. In this article, he writes, after sealing 12,000 in each tribe, there comes a great tribulation. And in this one, what happens once the 144,000 are sealed is the great tribulation. And it is written that it is after the great tribulation that the multitude in white will come. So this is the order in which this will be fulfilled. Both the Bible and Lee Man-Hee testify that the great tribulation will not take place until the 144,000 have been sealed. Then, how much of this has been fulfilled today? Let's have a look at some more articles to find the answer. In that same article from the 29th of February 2020, he writes, we are now facing this great tribulation, and the whole country is facing this great tribulation. In this one he says, the fact this great tribulation has come, Revelation 7, is the evidence that 144,000 of the 12 tribes have been sealed. And in this one, additionally, it is recorded that after the 144,000 are sealed, the trial that will come upon the whole world, that is, the great tribulation, will take place for the creation of the multitude in white. But this great tribulation, the COVID-19 pandemic, has currently begun. And in this article, now is the time of the great tribulation as mentioned in the Bible. He's clearly testifying that the great tribulation is currently taking place, and that this means the 144,000 of the 12 tribes have been sealed. But here's the problem. Bartholomew tribe does not currently, and has never in the past, had 12,000 members. This is a graph from the year 36 General Assembly Yearly Report. It's a little bit difficult to see, but there's a light green colour in there, 2 above the pink Philip, and that's Bartholomew tribe. In 2019, they had approximately 5,000 members. This is the end of 2019. And unfortunately, I suspect it's due to COVID-19, there wasn't a 2020 General Assembly yearly report. However, as we can see from the previous quote that we looked at from Trung Hui Chinim, he said the Great Tribulation has started from at least the 29th of February 2020. So according to Trung Hui Chinim, there should be 12,000 sealed per tribe from the 29th of February 2020. And this just isn't possible if we need to seal and evangelize 7,000 members in 3 months in order to fill Bartholomew tribe. But we don't even need to do any of this guesswork to know that Bartholomew tribe hadn't filled their number by 29th of February 2020, because in an article published in the 11th of April 2021, he wrote, "However, there are 7 tribes that have not completely filled the sealed 12,000. So let's recap and summarize what we know so far. The order according to Revelation 7 verse 3 and Trung Hui Chinim's testimony is that first, the 144,000 are sealed. Then, after this, the Great Tribulation takes place. Secondly, Trung Hui Chinim says the Great Tribulation has been taking place since at least the 29th of February 2020. Thirdly, Trung Hui Chinim said that 7 tribes had not filled the sealed 12,000 on April 11th, 2021. Fourthly, Bartholomew tribe does not have 12,000 members, so cannot have 12,000 sealed. Is there any explanation for this glaring discrepancy aside from a potential change in doctrine? Well, let's cover some of the possible counterarguments to make sure that there's not something we're missing. The first counterargument would be that the 144,000 have been sealed, we just don't know who they are yet. The problem with this is that the 144,000 is the same thing as the 12,000 per tribe. For the 144,000 to be sealed, there must be 12,000 sealed per tribe. Trung Hui Chinim himself said in April 2021 that 7 tribes hadn't filled their 12,000, and Bartholomew has never had 12,000 members. So knowing which members are sealed is irrelevant, because it's been confirmed by Trung Hui Chinim that 7 tribes didn't have 12,000 sealed as of April 2021, and Bartholomew has never had enough members to have 12,000 sealed. The second potential counterargument is that members can move tribe. So perhaps some members will transfer to Bartholomew tribe to increase their numbers over 12,000. But even if those members move today, it wouldn't affect what we're talking about. All 12 tribes needed to have 12,000 sealed members before the start of the Great Tribulation, according to both Revelation 7 verse 3 and Trung Hui Chinim's own testimony. The fact they did not have 12,000 sealed as of the 29th of February 2020 is the problem. And the third potential counterargument is that perhaps there's some kind of spiritual explanation. The problem with this is that there needs to be 12,000 physical members with the seal of God in each tribe, and we can confirm this through an article, The Difference Between the First Heaven and First Earth and the New Heaven and New Earth. From the 19th of June 2020, it says this number was 144,000. This is an event in the physical world. So by examining what Sung Sanim himself has taught, it appears that the current testimony that the Great Tribulation is taking place contradicts the order of events he previously testified. The fact there is at least one tribe which has not sealed 12,000 members cannot be ignored. And to end this section, I'd like to finish with a Sung Sanim quote. It's taken from one of his sermons, and it says, "The reason that I speak about the 12,000 so often is because the 12,000 per tribe must be filled for the Great Tribulation to take place, and the great multitude in white to come. This is the order that is in the Bible." The next section is the Great Tribulation, and to begin with, let's remind ourselves of those 2 basic beliefs about Trung Hui Chinim. The first is that he saw and heard the physical fulfillment of all the events of the entire book of Revelation, from Rev 1 to Rev 22, and received the explanation of the events from an angel. The second is that he attained a complete understanding of the entire book, and has perceived the true meaning of Revelation and the realities of its physical fulfillment. Then according to his own testimony, he must know what the physical fulfillment of each of the events of the entire book of Revelation is, because he claims he saw them all. Furthermore, Chonghui testifies the reality of all the events of Revelation according to the 5Ws 1H principle: who, what, when, where, why, how. So he must have also received this understanding if it's true that nothing he teaches is his own thoughts. And I know that there might be some details that he didn't see, for instance, but he must have at least been given this understanding of the 5Ws 1H, because this is what he teaches. And if he's teaching his own thoughts, then that's a problem. Then it would also be a problem if Chonghui did not know who was involved in one of the events of the physical fulfillment, right? It would break what he's taught about himself. Well, before the COVID-19 pandemic began, Chonghui taught that after the 144,000 were sealed, the Great Tribulation would take place, and it would be a judgment of the churches of the world, out of which the great multitude in white would come. Chonghui taught that after the 144,000 were sealed, the truth about Shincheonji would be revealed to the world, and the great multitude in white would come flooding in. As a brief side note, Shincheonji is not considered part of the churches of the world because it's believed to be the kingdom of heaven on earth. We can confirm this by looking at the article "We Must Overcome the World," written on the 7th of November 2021. He wrote, "Not only do we not belong to the world, we must overcome the world. The number of those who belong to the world is great, and the workers for God's new thing are few. Even so, we must overcome." So let's take a look at some of the teachings of Chonghui from before the COVID-19 pandemic. The excerpt that we're going to look at is quite long, so if you do want to pause and read it all, feel free to do so. I'm just going to be reading the key parts though. It's from page 163 of the Physical Fulfillment of Revelation, and it says, "As explained in Revelation 7 verse 1, wind represents judgment, and the land, sea, and every kind of tree represent all of the churches and churchgoers of the world. God judges those who have betrayed before later judging the rest of the people of the world. After God plagues the tabernacle of the 7 golden lampstands in Revelation 6, and finishes the work of sealing the 144,000 people who will heal all nations, he judges all the churches of the world with the Great Tribulation." And in the Revelation sealing education from the General Assembly, the explanation of Revelation 7 verse 1 states the land, sea, and tree are the tabernacle of the chosen people that sinned, the world, and the congregation of all the denominations. And the explanation of Revelation 7 verse 9 to 14 states, the Great Tribulation is judging the churches of the world, that is, judgment of the leftovers in the CCK and Babylon. So there's no mention that the Great Tribulation would affect Shincheonji. And furthermore, Chonghui even admitted in a letter to the congregation members that he thought good things would happen after the 144,000 were sealed. In the special letter, he writes, "It was thought that when the 144,000 are sealed, good things would happen, but the unwanted Great Tribulation struck instead." Who is Chonghui referring to when he says it was thought? Well, it can't be the churches in the world, because they don't interpret Revelation in this way. So perhaps he means that some people misunderstood. Well, again, no, because every other time he's corrected people who have misunderstood, he rebukes them harshly and explains why they were wrong. Whereas in this one, he's simply saying, this is what was thought. It seems that he would be referring to all members of Shincheonji, because he taught that good things would happen after the 144,000 was sealed. He taught that the Great Tribulation would come, and the great multitude would come flooding into Shincheonji. In fact, the original Korean can be translated as either "I thought" or "it was thought." So it's clear from observing Chonghui teachings about the Great Tribulation from before the COVID-19 pandemic that he thought the Great Tribulation would not affect Shincheonji negatively. However, he's now teaching that the Great Tribulation is taking place and that Shincheonji is currently suffering because of the Great Tribulation. Let's take a look at some articles to confirm this. In this article from the 15th of September 2021, he writes, "Additionally, it is recorded that after the 144,000 are sealed, the trial that will come upon the whole world, that is, the Great Tribulation, will take place for the creation of the multitude in white. But this Great Tribulation, the COVID-19 pandemic, has currently begun." Again, he writes, "We are now in the Great Tribulation. According to the order recorded in the Prophecies, we are now experiencing the Great Tribulation and the trial. We must overcome this trial." On the 31st of October 2020, he wrote, "Once those who have been harvested get sealed and their number is filled, there comes to be a great tribulation and trial. This is the trial that comes upon the whole world and the great tribulation. there is no record of its length of time. We must overcome this trial and great tribulation. And on the 28th of January 2021, he wrote, due to COVID-19, we, Shincheonji, have suffered harm and pain, and several appointed workers have even been detained. Through whose persecution? Through the persecution by the Protestant Church. This is proof that Jesus' prophecy has been fulfilled. The evil winds of the ruling powers blew on Shincheonji, that created the 12 tribes by sealing the 144,000 born of God's seed. If Tribulation really did see the physical fulfillment of all the events of the entire book of Revelation and receive the explanation from an angel, shouldn't he know key details, such as who the Great Tribulation affects? Especially if this is something that he's teaching. He shouldn't be teaching it incorrectly, right? Even Jesus gave detailed predictions of events before they took place, in accordance with John 14, verse 29. We can see some of them here on the slide. Perhaps you might be thinking that even though Tribulation saw the physical fulfillment of all the events of the entire book of Revelation, this might have been a detail which couldn't be known until it was fulfilled. But if that's the case, then let's think about Revelation 22 verse 18 to 19. If Tribulation does not have a complete understanding of the Great Tribulation before it takes place, then by teaching the incorrect reality, he is adding and taking away. Tribulation explicitly taught that those afflicted by the Great Tribulation did not include Shincheonji. But now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the doctrine has been changed, and Shincheonji is included with those afflicted. This next topic of the Great Multitude in White is more of a minor observation, but it demonstrates an important point nonetheless. In Revelation 4 verse 6, there is a sea of glass, clear as crystal, before God's throne, which represents God's word, which is flawless and perfect. And this is what Tribulation claims to be testifying. He claims to have God's word, clear as crystal, flawless and perfect. It's interesting to note then how vague, ambiguous, and unclear his testimony about the Great Multitude in White can be, and how much it varies each time he testifies it. If we take a look at some of Tribulation's articles, we can see this for ourselves. In this one he writes, now the Great Multitude in White will rush in from the Great Tribulation. But in another he writes, after the Great Tribulation is finished, the Great Multitude in White will come. In this third one, it is after the Great Tribulation that the multitude in white will come. In another, the Great Multitude in White will appear amidst the great trial and great tribulation that has come upon the entire world. And in this one he says, the great multitude who come into this place are the ones who come out of the Great Tribulation after the creation of the sealed 12 tribes. And finally, in this one he says, it is the 144,000 created of those who are harvested and sealed as promised when Revelation is fulfilled, and the multitude in white who came out of every place on their own after this. I hope it's clear to see that these articles directly contradict each other. In some, Tribulation teaches that the great multitude in white will come out after the Great Tribulation is finished, while in others he teaches they will come out during the Great Tribulation. There's clearly two different orders of events. But as the mouthpiece of God and Jesus, shouldn't Tribulation's testimony be clear and consistent? On top of this, if you were a member during year 36 and 37, that is 2019 and 2020, you surely would have heard during sermons and educations that the great multitude would not need to be evangelized. You may even recall it was said the great multitude would start to flood in after seeing the 100,000 graduation. Tribulation himself even said the great multitude would not need to be evangelized during a sermon on the 6th of June 2020, stating that it doesn't say they will be evangelized in the Bible. We can even see from the last article we looked at, he says they'll come out on their own. However, it's now taught that the great multitude are currently being evangelized. So it seems that this doctrine has been changed many times. The next topic we're going to look at is the wars within Revelation. One of the fundamental aspects of Shincheonji doctrine is that there is an ongoing war between good and evil, between God and Satan. This war is said to be between good spirits and evil spirits, and that these spirits can affect people in the physical world. It is taught that Revelation as a whole can be summarized into one word, war. However, beyond this summary, if we observe the chapters of Revelation in detail, it's taught that there are a distinct number of wars within Revelation. As we established above, Tribulation saw and heard the physical fulfillment of all the events of the entire book of Revelation, and received the explanation of the events from an angel, and he has perceived the true meaning of Revelation and the realities of its physical fulfillment. As such, Tribulation must know the number of wars fought within Revelation, right? Because this is not a small detail. Well, as we'll see, Tribulation has very clearly changed his testimony, initially testifying that there are 2 wars, before changing it to 3, and then later claiming the third is some kind of extension of the second, to make the final number something like 2.5. So let's take a look at some excerpts from past articles to see how many wars Tribulation used to teach there were. If we look at this article written on the 28th of February 2019, it says, Revelation is what Jesus prophesied, and it will end after everything fulfills. What has to be fulfilled are the 2 wars between God and the devil, the betrayal of the chosen people and the destruction brought to the chosen people who betrayed by the destroyers. When Jesus, the Saviour, and the promised pastor fight and win against the army of the devil, the enemy, then comes the salvation, power, and the kingdom of our God. Revelation 12. Note that the reference is Revelation 12, confirming that this last sentence is again referring to the 2 wars, not to some third war in Revelation 16 or 18. And in this next article, written on the 8th of December 2019, it says, This is the testimony of the physical fulfillment of Revelation 1 to 22. There were 2 wars between those who belonged to God and those who belonged to the devil. During these wars, the betrayers, destroyers, and saviors appear and they fight each other. The first war was won by the devil, and the second war is won by God. Now one could claim that the third war is not mentioned in this article because it hadn't taken place yet. However, this article also gives a summary of all the events of Revelation, including those which hadn't taken place, such as the first resurrection in Revelation 20, and yet it doesn't mention any third war. Instead, it indicates that Revelation 16, 17, and 18 have already been fulfilled. But regardless of any argument of small and large-scale fulfillment for Revelation 16, 17, and 18, what's important is that just as in the previous article, Tribulation teaches that there are only 2 wars in Revelation. Then let's take a look at some more recent articles to see if the number of wars remains consistent. Again, if Tribulation truly did see all the events of Revelation, then his testimony should not change, and according to Revelation 22, verse 18 to 19, he should not add or take away. So in this article, written on the 12th of April 2020, he writes, These 3 beings appear and have a war at the time of fulfillment of Revelation. First war was the war in Rev 13, second war was the war in Rev 12, and third war was the war of Rev 16, 18. The world does not know that because these wars are the spiritual war between churches. And in this article, written on the 14th of April 2020, he writes, The former belongs to God and the latter belongs to the devil, and these 2 groups fought in Rev 13, 12, and 16. The first war was Rev 13, the second war was Rev 12, and the third war was Rev 16. And in this article from the 12th of December 2020, he writes, Wars take place in Rev 13, Rev 12, and Rev 16. First war, second war, third war. So in those articles, Tribulation's teaching that there are 3 wars, even though he used to teach there were only 2. If he really saw all the events of Revelation, why would he not teach that there are 3 wars from the start? Or if he didn't know about the third war until its fulfillment, how can he claim to have seen all the events of the entire book of Revelation? He doesn't claim to have seen all the events that have been fulfilled so far. He claims he received the vision of all the events from Rev 1 to Rev 22, and received the explanation from an angel, which is how he is able to identify the fulfillment when it takes place. But it seems that Tribulation also found this third war odd, and decided to backtrack and say it's actually an extension of the second war. If we look at this article from the 22nd of January 2021, he writes, The obstruction of God's work and the first and second round of the war. The first round of the war is Revelation 13. And the second round of the war is Revelation 12 and 16. Revelation 16 can be seen as the third round of the war. Who won? God won. When the war is won, judgment begins. It's almost as if Tribulation himself is confused about how many wars there should be, initially teaching there were only 2. then adding a third in Revelation 16, before finally setting on something like 2.5, with Revelation 13 being the first, Revelation 12 being the second, and Revelation 16 being the 2.5. The final topic we'll look at in this video is regarding the claim that Tribulation established peace in Mindanao. To understand this belief, let's take a look at HWPL's website. It's written, going back to the year 2014, a messenger of peace had intervened and hosted a peace agreement ceremony to bridge the gap between our Catholic and Islamic leaders in Mindanao. HWPL Chairman Lee visited the Philippines and urged our local leaders to negotiate a peace agreement. Mindanao, a land that had suffered from a 40-year conflict, had finally settled the long-time disputes in the region. After the Mindanao peace deliberation, with HWPL Chairman Lee, who joined the event, transcending the boundaries of religion and nationality for the first time in this region, peace then came to Mindanao. The current doctrine is that due to the efforts of Tribulation, peace was established in Mindanao on the 24th of January 2014. We can further confirm this through Tribulation's articles and tests. In an article published 17th of December 2020, Tribulation wrote, on January 24th, 2014, the peace messengers went to Mindanao in the Philippines and established peace to a place torn by 40 years of conflict and with war casualties numbering over 120,000. Peace was achieved in one day, within a few hours, by peaceful means on a civilian level, where a Catholic priest and an Islamic leader signed a peace agreement. They have since erected a peace monument and made the 24th of January HWPL Day and celebrate it every year. How could this have been possible without God? And in a Bible exam, round 8, issued in year 38, question 9 was, write the date of liberation of Mindanao, Philippines, from religious conflict. And the answer was the 24th of January 2014. The claim Tribulation is making is clear. He's not simply saying that he got two religious leaders to sign a document, because that would obviously be possible without God. Instead, he's claiming to have liberated Mindanao from religious conflict. So then how can we verify if this is true or not? Thankfully, there are independent, non-profit, non-governmental groups which research and provide objective and evidence-based information on humanitarian crises, such as the conflict in Mindanao. One such organization is ACAPS. Their full report on the Mindanao conflict can be found on their website. But if we look at an excerpt, we can see that the Mindanao conflict is still an ongoing crisis. And I apologize for any mispronunciation. It says, the Islamic State has had influence in Mindanao since 2014. The siege of Marawi City in 2017 in Lanao del Sur province was a 5-month battle between pro-Islamic state fighters and the Philippine military. The conflict displaced 400,000 people to nearby towns and left houses and infrastructure destroyed or damaged. The establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao in March 2019 has been a major step towards conflict resolution between the Philippine government and several autonomy-seeking groups, particularly the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. BARM is the poorest region in the country. Armed conflict and violence are still common in BARM's poorest provinces in Lanao del Sur, Maguindanao, and Sulu, where clashes between the military and armed groups such as the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters and the Islamic State-linked Abu Sayyaf group occur frequently. Another organization, Project Ploughshares, has a good overview of the Mindanao conflict as well as yearly summaries. Regarding the number of deaths, they write, between May 23rd and October 23rd, 2017, extremely violent clashes between the Mort group and Abu Sayyaf and the Philippine military resulted in the deaths of approximately 1,130 people, according to the government. Of these, 920 were militants, 165 troops and police, and some 45 were civilians. Personally, this doesn't seem like any kind of peace I want to experience. The religious conflicts are ongoing, with more than 1,000 people dying in 2017 alone. So I hope it's clear to see that Tribulation's claim that he established peace in Mindanao in 2014, for which he provided no evidence, is proven false by the evidence of ongoing religious conflict and loss of life. Finally, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've observed so far. Individually, it may be possible to overlook or explain away the discrepancies that have been pointed out in the current doctrine, but I encourage you to consider them all together for a moment. I would say we've observed at least 4 major discrepancies, as well as numerous minor ones. The major ones would be, first, there were not 12,000 sealed per tribe before the Great Tribulation started. Second, Chonghuijinim used to teach that the Great Tribulation would not negatively affect Shincheonji, but now teaches that it does. Thirdly, Chonghuijinim used to teach there were 2 wars in Revelation, but now teaches there are 3 and sometimes 2.5. And fourthly, Chonghuijinim's claim that he established peace in Mindanao in 2014 is false. If we consider these discrepancies collectively, they become much more difficult to dismiss. They cannot be explained away as some simple misunderstanding, mistranslation, or the sabotage of an individual document, because they relate to various aspects of Shincheonji doctrine. I would go so far as to say that with the evidence provided to support and demonstrate each of these discrepancies, it's been shown that at the very least, Chonghuijinim has lied multiple times. I would also suggest that it's been demonstrated Chonghuijinim has added and taken away from Revelation multiple times as well. Ultimately, you're free to make your own conclusions. But I hope that the information provided in this video has at least given you something to think about. And I would encourage you to watch the next video as well, where I'll be taking a closer look at the past doctrine of Shincheonji.